Hey guys, so we're gonna Michaela and I are upstairs in our indoor range, and we're just gonna kind of go over some shooting techniques, kind of just basic things that you can do to kind of help yourself out, and little tips and tricks. So first, we're gonna kind of go over a few different releases that everybody uses. This is the release that I use, and then I'll show you my backup. So I'm using the TrueFire fold back. It's an adjustable. Now, when I have this thing on my wrist, everybody kind of asks, oh, where you should have this. I have enormous hands. When my hands open, I mean, this thing's way back. But when I'm shooting, and this thing is pulled way out, you can see that the end of that clamp is way out towards my fingers. So this thing really rides down on my hand, and I want that hook right at my first knuckle, or right at that pinch point. I like a very sensitive trigger. This is a positive, so you have to actually pull the trigger to open it. Everybody's going to have their own release. This is the one that I like. It is sensitive, but that's just what I like. I like a trigger release. Michaela, she tends to punch a trigger just a tad bit. So she went with TrueBall's Fang 4, and it is a thumb. So it's got a little trigger mechanism here that you're going to hook the string on, and you can click this forward, and you're actually pulling backwards, so you're upside down, and then you can use it as a back tension or as a true thumb release. And it doesn't have much there for the release mechanism, but for somebody that tends to punch a trigger real hard, the thumb movement is really going to pull that trigger punch out. This is another backup TrueFire that I use. This one's not adjustable. It's definitely the older style trigger punch. This thing, if you breathe on this, it's going off. But it's not a positive, to where you actually have to click it forward for it to go off. But I mean, you breathe on that thing, it's very sensitive. And then the newest one, the Max 3 Hunter by TrueBall, is also another one that I use as a backup, to where it is a 3-finger but in a thumb release, but this one you actually have to push forward to activate. Now, each one of these is going to actually change your draw length with your bow. I draw very long, 31.5, sometimes 32, depending on what bow I'm shooting. For my hunting setup, and I'll show it to you here, I shortened my draw up to about 29.5. And I learned the hard way. I was hunting in Davenport for turkey, and I'm sitting in the blind, and I'm sitting square in the blind, and I had some turkeys come in on my right-hand side. I couldn't move my feet and my rear end in the blind, and I had to swivel all the way to my right. I couldn't move my lower half. As you guys can see, I'm a big guy. So I had everything stretched out at that 31 draw, and as I came across, now my string is, my release point, my D-loop is back at my ear to be able to pull. And you can't. There's no way to sight. So at those weird angles, and just with shooting a lot more, for my hunting setup, I shortened everything up. So if I have to go at a weird angle, I don't have a problem with that now, and I've come accustomed with my hunting setup to shoot a shorter draw. Competition stuff, I stretch everything out. I'm standing on a line. I'm not having to shoot around weird objects and angles, so I don't have that problem. So with that being said, I'll go ahead. I'll throw on my normal release, and I'll throw a couple of arrows just to show you form. I'm not saying that this is what you guys need to do by any means. This is how I shoot, but this is just to give you guys some idea, and maybe you guys can take something from it. So I'm going to be shooting, we've kind of nicknamed this thing Helinor. This is it's got a 17 riser, and that's about it. It is the Inferno, the Martin Inferno. It's the Phoenix. It's got the Phoenix string system with the Symmetry M4 cams. The limbs are not. It's now set at 86 pounds. It can go up to about 94 pounds. This thing is an absolute cannon. It's an animal now. I love it. It shoots phenomenal. We were having a little bit of issue with the 70-pound limbs. Now that we just switched them out here day before yesterday, the thing is an absolute animal. I love it, and I'll probably switch it up and wick it up a little bit more to the 96, because I like shooting that big poundage. But anyways, away from that. So what I use when I shoot, as many anchor points as you can possibly use is the best. I use my hand on the nook of my ear. I use the string on my cheek. I use the D-loop on the corner of my mouth, and I use the string on the tip of my nose. As many spots on my face as possible is that many more anchor points and point of reference is better. It's just that many more points of reference that I can use to know that I'm going to be anchored in and consistent every single time. So when you're drawing back, you want to stay away from the sky draw. You don't want to do these big draws like that. It's just telling you that you're pulling way too much poundage. So you want to stay away from drawing at the floor and drawing up top. What I use is I slightly draw down away from my face. If you do happen to have a D-loop malfunction, the last thing that you want to do is punch yourself in the face. I've done it. It does not feel good. You either catch your release to the face or a knuckle to the face, you bust a tooth or your lip or whatever. But I do point my arrow in the direction of my target, and I keep it that way. That way, if it does break, you're still sending an arrow downrange. That way, it's at least going towards your target and not off in the stray direction. So you can pull your arms a little bit low, but you're going to point your bow in the direction of your target, and then just pull back uniform. You don't have to heave and hoe and everything. If you're doing that, you're pulling too much poundage. You need to back it down. And then work yourself up, build that muscle to get to the poundage to where you can pull more. So once you get your poundage pulled back and you get to your draw length, and your draw length is everything, you want to keep your feet at a good distance apart. I tend to lean onto my left front leg. That's just personal preference. That's what I like. Everybody, some people tend to lean back. Some people throw their front hip. It's what's comfortable for you. So when I'm back at full draw, I tend to throw my right or my trigger arm, elbow high. So when I come into that, I've got my anchor point on my face. I've got the string on my cheek. I've got the D-loop at the corner of my mouth. I've got the string just touching my nose. My grip is very, very loose. My thumb is just in the back of the riser, and my fingers on the front are not touching. When I just bring my front fingers on my riser into contact, my bubble is level, is when I bring my front finger onto the trigger and I'm ready to steady my shot. And I release. I'm not squeezing the trigger. I'm not punching the trigger. I'm just breathing or just putting pressure onto that trigger. I'm pulling through the shot. When you pull through the shot, you don't want to, when you're in line, you don't want to pull out this way. You want to pull directly back behind you because the string technically is running in a line through the middle of your face. So that line, when you have that bow away from you and you're looking through, that string is running through the middle of your face. So when you pull straight out the back, your arm is actually going in a line with your shoulders. So when you pull like this, that is throwing the string the wrong way. You want to pull in line with your shoulders, and so you actually feel like you're going behind you a little bit. That is going to keep your shot perfectly pulling and not putting any extra lean into that cam. The hand on the riser. It's very important that you don't put any extra torque into that riser. You very easily, if you're gripping the hell out of that riser, can derail a string. You don't want to put any extra influence into that riser. Very, very loose grip. And that goes for if you're running a bow strap or a wrist strap on your bow. You don't want that thing contacting your wrist. You don't want that tight. That's there as a safety net in case you drop your bow to catch it. So if you guys can tell, this thing is super, super loose on my wrist. You don't want that touching. That way that bow can move around. It's not until I drop that bow that it would catch. It's absolutely just a safety net. Any added touching on your arm or wrist or anything is going to put torque into that riser. And you want to be at a comfortable enough spot. At this bow being 86 pounds a draw, I'm holding back. On this cam, I'm about 72% let off, to where I can hold it for some time. But even with talking, and I don't shoot as much as I used to, but I can sit on it for a little bit. I mean, that's not a problem. But when you're in the heat of the moment and you got animals coming in and you got to sit there and adrenaline's pumping and all of that, you'll get shaken and you got to be able to calm your breath and everything. And I'll walk down. That shot that I just made absolutely pinwheeled an X at 20 yards. And if you can't do that and sit back and be able to talk and move and all of that, you have to make adjustments. You're either pulling too much poundage or you're putting too much influence on your bow. You have to be able to relax enough that if there's an outside influence, that you can calm yourself enough to make a shot when it counts. We want to make ethical shots, even if it is stretching your limit for distance. So I'll go back, I'll shoot one more. I'll speed it up just a little bit. So remember, as many anchor points as you possibly can get. I use 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 different spots on my face for anchor point. Relaxed grip. As soon as my fingers come in contact with the front of the riser, and I'm using just the 2 fingers on the riser, that's when my trigger finger will come out around and I'm ready. Once my bubble is level and my pin is on target. So as soon as you guys see my pin come out and around that thing, that means that everything else is in line and ready to rock and roll. So with that being said, definitely set your stuff when you guys are either having issues or there's certain things that you guys are having issues with. Pull through your shot. Make sure if there's something that you're constantly throwing one way or another, and you're constantly doing certain sight adjustments, don't always just lean on making a sight adjustment. Make sure that you're not putting added torque in the bow. It could very easily be that you're letting up pressure on your release, that you're starting to creep on your arrow right before you actually squeeze the trigger. Make sure that you have steady pressure, that you're pushing through and pulling equal tension every single time. Have somebody watch the front of your arrow. Right before your shot, make sure that your arrow isn't creeping forward or creeping backwards. You can really tell and make sure that it's not flying one way or the other. Knowing that your bow is paper tuned is a big one. If you notice that your arrows are stacked weird all the time into your target, we'll tell you if your bow's paper tuned. If they're in all straight and you're throwing all weird and not consistent, it's a telltale sign that something with your body, your mechanics, and your fundamentals is off. Lower your poundage, work on those fundamentals, and then work on upping your poundage. If you don't have a good foundation, it's going to be really hard to have a sturdy building. Another good point with everything, just had somebody come in, so it kind of lost train of thought. We've had a lot of guys, they're like, hey, we just watch me and see if you notice anything that might be off, something that might catch your eye. And the number one thing that I notice is the death grip on the front of the bow. And I've told everybody that when you grab that riser, try not to grab it use Michaela's bow as an instance here. Try not to grab it so straight up and down. Kind of like if you're going to grab somebody by the arm, you're going to kind of put your hand in a little bit at an angle. So because this thumb muscle right here is so strong, that it has a lot of influence on your riser. And when you put that into that riser, that's a real big flat spot. So when I grab my bow, these 2 fingers I stack right on top. These 2 fingers are loose and never touch my riser. So this is how I hold my bow. My thumb never touches, and that way that's the biggest flat spot in my hand, and I stay away from that whole valley that runs down the middle of my hand. Now, if I turn my hand completely in, if you notice the curvature of the front part of your hand, and you go like this, you have a big muscle, a valley, and then another muscle on the outside of your hand. Well, there's not much of a flat spot. So I'm just looking for the biggest flat spot to put on the backside of my riser. And it is tended to work the best for me. But I have huge hands and not a lot of flexibility. So if you're having issues with your hand in your riser, try it. It's not gonna work for everybody, but it may work for you. So if you guys have any other questions or anything regarding that, make sure to give us a call, 360-304-9103, or hit us up on Facebook at TNS Archery Outdoors. All right, thanks guys.